Chapter 6. They were going over ice now. They were on a lake, just a few centimetres between them and the freezing water. Tom pulled back his head and called up to Callie. "Is it deep?" "Not understand," said Callie. His voice boomed across the lake. The trees at the lakeside seemed to shake. "Is there much water?" said Johnny. He pointed at the ice. Callie nodded. There were branches and sticks poking out of the ice. They marked the safe path across the lake, where the ice was thickest. It was like a race now, like the skiing they'd seen on telly. The dogs went right between the sticks. Sometimes they skidded, but it didn't slow down or confuse them. Aki went past them on the snowmobile. He hit one of the marker branches, but it didn't snap or fall. It sprang back to the upright position. "The ice must be thick," said Tom. He had to say it loud. The sky seemed to swallow up his voice. "Yeah," said Johnny. They were safe, but it was still exciting. Ice melted, ice broke. Some messers might have changed the positions of the sticks and sent the sled the wrong and dangerous way. They sailed over the ice. They went past a house. It was suddenly there at the edge of the lake, like a story house. It was wood and painted green. It seemed to move beside them, and then they left it behind. Johnny looked back, but the house was gone, hidden by the trees. He was cold. His face was very cold. He hadn't moved in hours. He saw Aki ahead of them. The snowmobile went over a hump and into the trees. Aki was off the lake. Johnny couldn't see him now. Just before the dogs reached the lakeside, he saw a wide gap in the trees, and he could see the sun. He could see half the sun, like the top half of a big red eye, staring at him. "Is that the sun or the moon?" said Tom. "Sun," said Johnny. "How do you know?" said Tom. "Shut up," said Johnny. The dogs climbed the bank. One of them slipped, but was held up by the others and the harness. They dragged the sled up off the ice. They were in among the trees again, and the wind was off their faces. But they were still cold, that shivery feeling that takes ages to go away. The light had changed. It was darker there. The trees closed in above them, and the light was cut into long lines that got thinner, until the sled went deeper into the trees, and they left the light behind. Then they saw the fire. The dogs headed for it. They swerved among the trees, but always when the turn was finished, the fire was in front of them. They came out of the trees to a small clearing with a frozen stream and snow-hidden bushes and silver light that seemed solid enough to climb. Aki was sitting at the fire on a log. He waved as Callie called over the boys' heads, and the dogs stopped. The sled stopped completely. Two of the dogs lay down. The boys started to climb off the sled. "Wait," said Aki. Callie walked past them and tied a strap to one of the small trees that grew beside the stream. "Okay," said Aki. They got off the sled and stood up. They were stiff. "Oh, me poor bones," said Johnny. Tom began to jump up and down. "Good idea," said Aki. But they stopped, because Aki was cutting wood, and that was much more interesting. He was slicing the top of a branch again and again, making it look like a pineapple or a mad haircut. "Burns better, I guess," he said. "See?" He held the branch close to the fire, and the cut pieces of the branch lit quickly. The boys watched the flame spread up through the branch. "Cool," said Tom. He wanted to take his knife out. It was hidden in one of his pockets, but he knew his mother would have gone mad if she'd seen it. The air was full of panting dogs and excited people. Aki and Callie helped everyone to tie their sleds. The dogs all sat or lay in the snow. They curled up and let themselves sink in. They hid their noses under their tails. Tom and Johnny took off their gloves and put their hands out over the flames. They sat down on a log. There were 4 logs in a square, seats around the fire. "Luxury," said Tom. "Move over, lads," said their mother. She got in between them. She pretended she was pushing them away. "What do you think?" she said. "Brilliant," said Tom. "It's boring," said Johnny. "Boring?" she said. "Boring?" She picked up a stick and shook it. "Come here till I give you boring." Johnny ran and she ran after him. He dived onto the snow. She sat on top of him. "Is it boring?" she said. "Yeah." She picked up a handful of snow. She put it to his nose. "Is it boring?" she said. Tom could hear Johnny laughing. "Yeah," said Johnny, "it's very boring." His mother's back was blocking Tom's view, but he thought she was shoving some of the snow down Johnny's back. "Is it boring?" he heard her. "Stop! Is it boring?" "No!" he shouted so loud a small bird shot out of a bush beside him. Tom laughed. "Siberian jay," said Aki. "This bird is the soul of a dead hunter." "Really?" said Tom. "For sure." Tom heard his mother. "It is exciting?" "Yes," Johnny yelled. "How exciting?" "Stop." "How exciting?" "The best ever." "Great," said his mother. She stood up. She hugged Johnny when he was standing up. Tom wanted to go over there now, to throw snow and be chased and hugged. The man from Belgium was sitting now, near Tom. "Your mother," he said. He pointed and smiled. "Is a very attractive woman," he said. Tom knew his face was turning red. He wanted to jump up and hit the man from Belgium, but his wife or girlfriend was sitting beside him, and she nodded too. She leaned out so she could look properly at Tom. "She is very nice," she said, "the way she plays with your brother." The man nodded, and that was fine. He just thought Tom's mother was nice, and that was okay, because she was. "Tom?" he heard Aki. Tom looked. Aki was at the fire, kneeling beside it. "Will you help?" said Aki. "Okay," said Tom. Would he help? He went so quickly he nearly tripped and died into the fire. He landed right beside Aki. Aki was cutting a thin branch at the top to make it split in two. He had tied 3 other thin branches together using a strip of bark. They stood like a teepee or the legs of a stool. "See how I cut?" he said. "Yeah," said Tom. Aki handed the knife to Tom. It was like one of the knives in the showcase, and way bigger than the knife Tom had hidden in his pocket. Aki was holding it out for Tom. He wasn't telling him to be careful or anything. Tom took the knife. He held the handle. It wasn't as cold as he'd expected, probably because Aki had been holding it. It was quite heavy. He looked around. He hoped Johnny was watching, and his mother too. They were. They were looking at him. They were coming towards the fire. He pretended he hadn't been looking at them. He turned back to Aki. Aki was holding the stick he'd been splitting. "See why I do this?" said Aki. "Yeah," said Tom. "Why?" said Aki. Not sure." "Cut it a bit more," said Aki. "Then I show you." "Okay." "What are you doing?" It was Johnny. "Helping Aki," said Tom. "How?" said Johnny. "We are making the coffee," said Aki. Tom was careful with the knife. This was his chance. He wasn't being treated like a baby. He cut a bigger notch at the top of the branch. He made sure the sharp side wasn't facing his fingers and body. He knew how to do it. He knew he was being watched. "Let's see," said Johnny. Tom knew what that meant. Johnny didn't want to see the knife. He wanted Tom to give it to him. Tom ignored him. "Give us a go," said Johnny. Tom could feel Johnny leaning into him, but he knew that Johnny wouldn't grab the knife, not in front of Aki and their mother. "Next time you," said Aki to Johnny. That was fine with Tom. He was the first one to use a real hunter's knife. "That is good," said Aki, and "okay." Tom stopped cutting. He didn't have to be told again. He handed the stick to Aki. He held the knife. He did nothing with it. He just held it, like it was a pen or a ruler or something normal from his life. He watched Aki put the branch across the other 3 branches, the ones he'd already tied. He made it lean across the top of the branches. It was now hanging over the center of the fire. "See?" said Aki. "Yeah," said Johnny. "And now," said Aki. He lifted the branches off the other branches. "You will see why you cut the wood." He picked up the coffee pot. It was like one of those old-fashioned pots from a Western film. It was made of tin and had a handle at the top. Aki pushed the handle between the 2 split parts of the branch top. Then he held the branch and put it hanging over the fire again, with the coffee pot right in the middle. He sat back on one of the log seats and put the end of the branch under his foot. The pot was on top of the fire, but the branch was too high above to catch fire. "That's brilliant," said Tom's mother. "It will take a very long time," said the man from Belgium. "Not so long, I guess," said Aki. They all sat on the logs around the fire, squashed into each other. They were very cold, but a bit too tired to notice. They waited for the coffee. They held the wooden cups that Aki handed them. The sweat was drying inside their suits. Their arms were still shaking from holding on to the sleds. Their hands were sweaty and aching. They sat in the silver, slanting sunlight. The heat of the fire lifted the smell of strong coffee to their noses. They knew this was special. They loved what they'd just done, and most of them dreaded doing it again in a few minutes. Some people spoke quietly to each other, and most were happy to stay quiet. "Boring!" It was Johnny, and he let himself fall backwards off the log so he'd land in the snow and get out of the squash of adult shoulders. Tom followed him. They stood up together and ran straight at the deep snow. Johnny stopped. "Are there any snakes here?" he asked. "Some, I guess," said Aki. "Adder, bushmaster, cobra." He shrugged. "It's okay," he said. "It's cool. They sleep, I think." Johnny looked at Tom. They ran. The snow got deeper and deeper. Ankles, shins, knees, over the knees. They ran past the dogs. They had to lift their legs higher. "Jump," said Johnny. 1, 2, 3. They jumped out of the hole of the snow. They lifted their arms. They stretched them out. They stuck out their chests. They hit the snow. The Café. Her mother put the tray on the table. She took off her coat and put it on the back of her chair. Then she sat down. She smiled and looked away, then looked again at Grania. "Well," she said. Grania said nothing. What was she supposed to say? She took a bite of her Danish. She was starving. But her mother started taking things off the tray, and Grania knew she'd started too early. She hated this. She'd been rude, but she didn't know why. She helped her mother. She took the milk tray off the jug. She took the milk jug off the tray and held it up, while her mother took the tray away and leaned it against one of the table legs. She put the jug on her mother's side. She'd been going to order coffee. It would have looked better than the cardboard cup of Coke she had in front of her. Coke for breakfast was childish and not the way Grania wanted to be, but she thought that coffee might make her feel sick. She felt a bit sick already. She was being like a kid. She was thinking like a kid. Maybe that was what happened when you were with your mother. You felt like a kid. She didn't know. She didn't like it. Her arms felt rubbery. She knew she'd spill the Coke. She wanted to get up and leave. She wanted to turn the table over, to get it done with, to spill it all over her mother. But she didn't. She didn't feel that way. It was like a fight going on inside her. "It's changed," said her mother. "What's changed?" said Grania. She was pleased with the way she said it. "Dublin," said her mother. "But you only just got here," said Grania. She felt the anger. She swallowed it back. She didn't want to wreck the day and everything. She knew she couldn't stop being angry, but she wanted to be in charge of it, and she didn't really feel angry now. "I know," said her mother. "I'm being a bit stupid. It's just, I haven't been here all these years and—" Grania resisted. She didn't say, "I know." "And," said her mother, "it's just, it hits you immediately, the changes." She stopped stirring the sugar into her coffee. She tapped the saucer with a spoon, once, twice. Grania watched her pick up the coffee. "Even this," said her mother. She held up the cup. "You couldn't get a proper cup of coffee when I—" She stopped. "What?" said Grania. She didn't say ran away or deserted me. She didn't exhale loudly. "When I lived there," said her mother. She looked at Grania for a while, properly. "Sorry," she said. She took a sip from her cup. She took the cup away. "I suppose everything we say, or at least I say, will be a bit of a minefield. Do you know what I mean?" Grania nodded. But, said her mother, it's true. You couldn't get a good cup of coffee. This is lovely. She said lovely the Irish way. Grania drank some of her coke. It calmed her down, the cold. It spread through her. Her mother was looking at her again. Tell me a bit about yourself, Grania, she said. No, said Grania. Her mother looked shocked and suddenly like a mother. I don't want to, said Grania. That's just crap. It's like a crap film. Her mother still looked shocked. I could say the same thing to you, said Grania. Tell me about yourself. It's horrible. Well, you know, said her mother, you've actually told me quite a lot about yourself just there. Grania wanted to lean across and hit her. She thought she was being clever. But Grania only wanted to be honest. She wanted this woman to listen to what she was saying and what she was going to say. Not what she thought Grania was saying. She'd no right. She didn't know Grania. Grania stopped herself. She wanted to know this woman. She really did. She had to stay calm. She tried to do it. You'll find out what I'm like, she said. She shrugged. You're right, said her mother. But do you mind if I tell you a bit about me? Grania shrugged again. If you like. Well, said her mother, you know I live in New York. Grania nodded, but this was weird. Where? She said. Where what? Where in New York? Said Grania. Manhattan, said her mother. The Upper West Side. Grania nodded. She'd imagined herself there. All her life she'd seen herself walking down one of the streets, or since she'd found out where her mother lived. What number street? She said. 116th, said her mother, and Amsterdam. She lived near the corner of 116th Street and Amsterdam Avenue. Streets across, avenues up and down. Grania had seen maps of New York on the internet. She'd printed one out. It was on her bedroom wall. Do you live in an apartment? She asked. Yes, said her mother. They don't have houses like here. Grania nodded. On your own? She said. It was out. It was like the table had fallen away, and there was nothing to lean on. I'm sorry, said her mother. Do you do you live on your own? No, said her mother. No, I don't. She was blushing. I was going to tell you other things first, she said. The good news, then the bad news, said Grania. No, said her mother. Just... God. She clutched her collar. She let go of it. Maybe I shouldn't have come, she said. This isn't what I expected. What did you expect? Said Grania. I don't know, said her mother. You thought it would be easy. No, said her mother. Not really. But yes. Me too, said Grania. I thought it wouldn't matter what you said, or anything. Her mother nodded. I thought we'd just have to see each other, said Grania. I've always thought that. How long? Always, said Grania. She watched her mother cry. She watched her wipe her eyes. I don't like the way you talk, said Grania. She watched her mother. I don't think you're honest, said Grania. I thought it would be different. She gulped back. She knew she wouldn't cry. I thought it would make sense when I saw you. Her mother nodded. She wiped her eyes again. Will we start again? She said. That's not honest either, said Grania. It's just crap. She stood up. She took her bag off the floor. She walked out. She walked down the street. She didn't look back. She didn't hear anything. She walked to the bus stop. She waited. It was cold. Her mother hadn't followed her. She got on the bus. She went home. Her dad was at work. She went up to her room. She shut the door. She put on her headphones. She wouldn't hear the bell. She wouldn't hear the phone. End of chapter 6 and the cafe.